On day 22 of the high-profile trial of Sean "Diddy" Combs, the courtroom was shaken by a testimony no one saw coming. Elon Musk, billionaire tech mogul and founder of Tesla and SpaceX, took the witness stand and delivered a shocking account that immediately became the center of international headlines. The gallery was packed, the air already thick with tension as the trial entered its fourth week. Then, just after 9 a.m., the heavy doors of courtroom 11B groaned open, and silence swept through the room. Elon Musk entered slowly, his every movement deliberate. Dressed in a crisp, dark suit with his jaw visibly clenched, he walked to the witness stand with no hint of hesitation. His eyes remained fixed forward, ignoring the sea of reporters, court officials, and spectators whose collective breath seemed to catch in their throats. Audible gasps rippled through the crowd. Cell phones buzzed and clicked as journalists scrambled to send updates. At the defense table, Diddy's demeanor changed in an instant. Mid-whisper with his attorney, his face froze, eyes narrowing in disbelief as Musk approached the stand. With practiced calm, Musk raised his right hand to be sworn in. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" the clerk asked. "I do," he replied firmly. Judge Arun Subramanian, ever composed, leaned forward from the bench, hands clasped. His voice echoed through the courtroom. "Proceed," he said, low and steady. Musk's voice, though steady, carried an unmistakable undercurrent of discomfort as he began. "It was 2004. I was seeking early investors for SpaceX," he said, pausing briefly to collect himself. "I reached out to a lot of people, tech leaders, venture capitalists, celebrities. Sean Combs was one of them." The courtroom listened in near total silence. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of paper and the clicking of reporters' keyboards. Every eye was locked on Musk, who sat upright, his hands folded in his lap as he continued. He responded quickly, seemed enthusiastic, said he admired ambition, especially from someone doing something as bold as launching rockets. "He invited me to a party at his house in LA, Musk said. He called it a networking opportunity, but also something else. Musk's brow furrowed slightly. He referred to it as a freak-off. I didn't know what that meant. I thought maybe it was just slang for an industry mixer, or maybe something flashy, eccentric. That wasn't uncommon in those circles. A ripple passed through the gallery, murmurs barely contained. From the defense table, Diddy remained still, but his expression tightened visibly. His jaw flexed as he whispered something to his attorney, Mark Agnifilo, who placed a calming hand on his shoulder and shook his head subtly. Meanwhile, the courtroom stenographer had paused, blinking rapidly, her pen suspended just above her notepad. Even she seemed briefly stunned by the phrase. Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey leaned in slightly, her posture sharpened. "What happened when you got there?" she asked, her tone careful but pressing. Musk shifted, his eyes flicking up toward the judge for a moment. The house was huge, heavily guarded. Music was pounding. People were already in costumes. It felt more like a masquerade than a party. He hesitated again, the memory clearly weighing on him. I didn't know what I was walking into. Gasps could be heard once more from the public gallery. The court clerk looked nervously toward Judge Subramanian, whose stony expression betrayed nothing. The judge offered a single nod, signaling the testimony should continue. And Musk did. Into territory no one in the courtroom was prepared for. "What happened when you got there, Mr. Musk?" Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey asked, her voice carefully modulated, though the undercurrent of urgency was unmistakable. Elon Musk shifted slightly in the witness chair, his brow furrowed as if recalling something buried deep. "There were people in masks," he said finally. "Not party masks, elaborate ceremonial ones. Some had feathers, others had horns. They were custom-made, clearly expensive. It didn't feel festive, it felt theatrical, like a performance." He paused, scanning the courtroom briefly before continuing. The lighting was all red, crimson bulbs, low and constant, no natural light anywhere. The music was this deep, slow bass line. Not music, really, just sound. It pulsed through the walls. Musk cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Someone handed me a drink. I didn't know what it was. Something thick, sweet, almost syrupy. Before I could even finish it, someone else appeared. They wore a mask shaped like a jackal's face. They motioned for me to follow." "What happened next?" Comey asked, leaning forward slightly. "They led me to a side room," Musk replied. Inside, the air was heavy, incense, something burning. It was hard to breathe. There were candles everywhere, wax dripping onto stone bowls. I saw symbols on the walls, strange ones. Not decorative, ritualistic. He hesitated, then glanced toward Judge Arun Subramanian as if seeking some kind of permission to continue. The judge gave a slow, deliberate nod. That's when a woman in a long robe approached me. She looked at me through this mask. It had no eye holes, just silver spirals, and she said, "It's time for the blood." Then they showed me this tub, low to the floor, steaming. I asked what it was, and she said, "Monkey blood." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. A woman in the gallery sobbed aloud, overcome. A man dropped his phone. Tension snapped like a live wire. Judge Subramanian struck his gavel with a loud crack. Order. This court will maintain order. At the defense table, Diddy turned red, shaking his head. Lies, he muttered harshly to Mark Agnifilo, who scribbled notes furiously. Diddy's other attorney, Tenny Garagos, whispered urgently in his ear. The courtroom, frozen in disbelief, waited for what Musk would say next. Elon Musk's voice grew more urgent, words spilling out with a mixture of distress and resolve. I was confused. They kept telling me it was part of the ritual, that I had to be reborn to receive their support. It didn't make sense to me, but I was overwhelmed. I felt trapped. He swallowed hard, his eyes fixed ahead, emotion flickering in their depths. They led me to a different room, quieter, colder. The atmosphere changed. The mask stayed on, but the tone shifted. The pleasantries stopped. They pressured me to take part in things I did not want to do. Musk's hands clenched briefly in his lap. I froze. I didn't consent to anything. I was terrified. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. The gravity of Musk's admission seemed to press down on everyone present. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to pause. Tenny Garagos, co-counsel for the defense, rose abruptly, hand raised to object. But just as she opened her mouth, Judge Arun Subramanian raised a firm hand, signaling her to remain seated. His expression was unreadable, commanding order without interruption. Musk remained steady, unflinching under the weight of the room's gaze. I left the next morning. Without a word, I never contacted Sean Combs again. The jurors sat motionless, absorbing the testimony. Even the court reporters' pens seemed to slow. The public gallery held its breath, caught between disbelief and sympathy. Judge Subramanian nodded slightly and said quietly, "Thank you, Mr. Musk. You may step down." As Musk stood and walked from the witness stand, the courtroom buzzed quietly with whispered questions, the shock of his revelation hanging thick in the air. The courtroom's atmosphere shifted palpably as Elon Musk concluded his harrowing testimony and stepped down from the witness stand. All eyes turned immediately to Sean "Diddy" Combs, who sat rigidly at the defense table. His face betrayed a storm of emotions: shock, disbelief, and simmering anger. Diddy leaned back slowly in his chair, eyes wide, mouth slightly agape. Then, with a barely audible movement of his lips, he mouthed the words, "He's crazy." The words seemed to hang in the heavy air of courtroom 11B, despite being uttered in near silence. Without hesitation, Diddy grabbed a pen from the table and slammed it down forcefully, the sharp click echoing throughout the chamber. His defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo, immediately rose, signaling for a sidebar, seeking to confer privately with the judge. Judge Arun Subramanian, maintaining his stern and composed demeanor, raised a hand to forestall the request. "No sidebar," he declared firmly. His tone brooked no argument. "This witness is under oath, and the court will not tolerate any attempts to disrupt proceedings." The judge then fixed his gaze on the defense team. The jury is tasked with assessing the credibility of all witnesses. It is their duty, not this court's, to weigh the testimony presented. Agnifilo closed his mouth tightly but did not press the issue further. Instead, he sat back down, exchanging a quick, tense look with co-counsel Tenny Garagos. Both attorneys appeared deep in thought, preparing for the next phase of their defense strategy. Diddy remained motionless, his face a mask of disbelief. His eyes flickered briefly toward the jury box, searching for some sign of support or skepticism. The jurors, however, maintained professional composure, their expressions neutral but attentive. In the public gallery, whispers rippled among spectators and reporters alike. The revelation by Musk had clearly rattled the courtroom, but Diddy's vehement denial injected a new level of drama and uncertainty into the trial's trajectory. Judge Subramanian glanced at his watch. then banged his gavel lightly. "We will now proceed with the defense's questioning." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The trial had just taken a dramatic and unexpected turn, one that promised to dominate headlines for days to come. As the courtroom doors closed behind Elon Musk's dramatic testimony, the chaos spilled out into the streets. A throng of reporters, spectators, and protesters jostled for position outside the courthouse. Phones were raised high, live streams started, and hashtags began to blaze across social media platforms worldwide. Musk Testifies exploded onto Twitter's trending list within minutes, rapidly climbing to #1 globally. The hashtag dominated feeds as millions tuned in to catch every detail of the unfolding scandal. Celebrities, influencers, and legal analysts weighed in, dissecting Musk's allegations with fervor and speculation. Protesters gathered on opposite sides of the barricades, their voices rising in heated chants. Some held signs demanding justice for victims, while others accused the prosecution of orchestrating a spectacle. The atmosphere crackled with tension, reminiscent of a political rally rather than a trial. "I thought this was about trafficking," a confused onlooker murmured to a nearby journalist. "Now it feels like some kind of secret society story, like Eyes Wide Shut but with billionaires." The surreal nature of Musk's claims had captivated and unsettled the public in equal measure. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere remained taut but focused. Reporters sat poised, fingers flying over keyboards as they rushed to file their stories. The air buzzed with whispered conversations. One assistant U.S. attorney, overheard during a brief recess, muttered quietly, "This changes everything." Her tone suggested that Musk's testimony had upended the prosecution's narrative, adding layers of complexity and new avenues to explore. Judge Arun Subramanian called the court back to order, but outside, the media storm showed no signs of abating. The trial had erupted from a high-profile celebrity case into a global spectacle, with Elon Musk's revelations fueling an intense and unpredictable firestorm. As cross-examination began, a tense hush fell over courtroom 11B. Mark Agnifilo, Sean Diddy Combs' lead defense attorney, rose deliberately and approached the witness stand with a practiced calm that barely concealed his frustration. "Mr. Musk," Agnifilo began, his voice measured but edged with skepticism, "are you aware of how implausible this sounds? Monkey blood? Strange rituals? These are not typical business dealings. Surely you understand how far-fetched this testimony appears." Musk met Agnifilo's gaze steadily, unflinching under the barrage. "I didn't want to believe it myself," he said quietly, voice thick with emotion. "But it happened. I have no reason to lie here. You think I want to be in this courtroom, retelling something so personal and humiliating?" The jury leaned forward in their seats, eyes fixed on Musk. Some were expressions of disbelief, others of sympathy. A few appeared visibly shaken. One alternate juror silently covered their face with their hands, struggling to process the gravity of the testimony. Agnifilo pressed on, attempting to undermine Musk's credibility. "Mr. Musk, you were new to this world of tech and finance back then. Isn't it possible you misunderstood or exaggerated events in a moment of stress?" Musk's reply was steady. "No, I remember every detail clearly. The fear, the confusion, it's burned into my memory." The courtroom remained silent, hanging on his words. Judge Arun Subramanian observed the exchange intently, occasionally glancing at the jury to gauge their reactions. The defense's efforts to cast doubt faced a formidable challenge. Musk's sincerity and the emotional weight of his testimony were resonating deeply. As Agnifilo prepared his next question, the battle for truth and for Diddy's reputation was far from over. Throughout the heated proceedings, Judge Arun Subramanian maintained a commanding presence, his calm authority anchoring the courtroom amid mounting tension. As the defense struggled to discredit Elon Musk's shocking testimony, Subramanian was quick to remind all parties of the trial's core purpose. "Let us not forget," Judge Subramanian intoned with measured firmness, "this trial centers on the defendant, Mr. Combs, and the charges brought against him, not the eccentricities or personal history of any witness." His gaze swept the courtroom, settling briefly on the defense attorneys before continuing. "That said, if the testimony provided by Mr. Musk reveals elements that suggest a broader pattern of conduct relevant to the case, then such testimony must remain part of the record." The judge's statement served as a clear signal. While he would not tolerate distractions or irrelevant allegations, he recognized the potential significance of Musk's account within the broader context of the trial. Mark Agnifilo's expression tightened, understanding the implications. The order to keep Musk's testimony on the record was a significant setback for the defense, who had hoped to isolate and dismiss the explosive claims as implausible or unrelated. Judge Subramanian's decisive ruling underscored his commitment to fairness and thoroughness, ensuring the jury had access to all pertinent information, regardless of how sensational or uncomfortable it might be. As the gavel came down, the courtroom absorbed the weight of the moment. The judge's balanced yet unyielding stance reinforced the seriousness of the trial and set the tone for the challenging days ahead. In the gallery and among legal teams, whispers spread, this trial was far from over, and Judge Subramanian's rulings would shape its unfolding drama in profound ways. Outside the courthouse, the seismic impact of Elon Musk's testimony sent shockwaves through the legal and media communities. Analysts and commentators struggled to process the implications of a billionaire tech mogul's disturbing account linked to a high-profile celebrity trial. If Musk is telling the truth, MSNBC legal analyst Janelle Hart stated during a live broadcast, this doesn't just change the trajectory of this case, it potentially opens the door to an entirely new tier of allegations. Financial coercion, ritualistic abuse, and sexual misconduct could be interconnected in ways previously unimagined. Her words echoed the growing consensus that Musk's testimony had expanded the scope far beyond initial expectations. Within hours, a wave of former party attendees reportedly stepped forward, sharing eerily similar stories of unsettling experiences at Sean Combs' properties. Some described bizarre ceremonies, others alleged coercion and intimidation masked as exclusive gatherings. Their accounts added fuel to the already fiery courtroom drama and hinted at a larger pattern of behavior under investigation. Federal investigators, according to sources familiar with the case, are now preparing additional subpoenas and expanding their probe into Diddy's network and financial dealings. The focus appears to be shifting from isolated accusations to a more systemic inquiry into possible abuse of power and influence. Legal experts emphasize that the investigation remains in its early stages, cautioning against premature conclusions. Still, the high-profile nature of the case and Musk's involvement have transformed it into a global spectacle with significant legal and cultural ramifications. Back inside courtroom 11B, the weight of this growing storm was palpable. Elon Musk's bombshell had not only reshaped the trial, but had thrust it onto an entirely new battlefield, one where wealth, power, and alleged abuse intersected with unprecedented intensity. As the final gavel struck, signaling the close of day 22, a heavy silence hung over courtroom 11B. The weight of Elon Musk's explosive testimony are casting a palpable tension over everyone present. Musk exited the courtroom under the watchful escort of U.S. Marshals, his expression unreadable yet resolute. The gravity of his words seemed to settle in the air long after he left. At the defense table, Sean Diddy Combs' legal team gathered quickly in a tight huddle. Their faces betrayed unease and shared sense of urgency. The defense was visibly shaken, grappling with how to respond to the unprecedented allegations now firmly part of the trial record. Meanwhile, the prosecution appeared visibly energized by the day's dramatic developments. Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey addressed reporters with a newfound confidence. Today was not just about one testimony, she said, her voice steady and determined. It was about uncovering a pattern of behavior, a pattern that's finally being exposed in full view of this court and the public. Comey's words underscored the shift in momentum. What began as a high-profile celebrity trial had now morphed into a deeper investigation into alleged systemic abuses of power, blending shocking personal revelations with broader legal implications. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy continued, unabated. Social media buzzed with speculation and debate. Legal experts weighed in on the complexities ahead, predicting that the defense would face immense challenges, countering Musk's credibility and the mounting corroborative accounts emerging. The trial is far from over, but with Elon Musk's startling confession, day 22 may very well mark a turning point, one that changes the trajectory of the case, the reputations involved, and the cultural conversation surrounding power, influence, and accountability.